What can I do? This is a very common question I've heard from new players, either in character creation or in their first session, trying to figure out exactly what their character is. There's a variety of different aspects of their character sheet that they need to familiarize themselves with, and it can all be quite a bit, at least in the beginning. Races, classes, subclasses, all of these things simply provide options for a player, and said options are incredibly important for giving a player an interesting and unique D&D experience. Hey folks, I'm Quinn the GM, back for another DM advice video, whichever name I decide to go with this. I am talking about the aforementioned options and how important they are in D&D or any other TTRPG. I saw a graphic on Twitter this week, I'll throw it up over here, talking about the classic line that fighters are linear and wizards are quadratic, at least in D&D 5e. This means while fighters start out from a better place and have a more constant and positive rate of growth, at least in the beginning, wizards very much surpass that at a point and continually shoot up. This graphic says that it seems to kind of disprove this in its entirety, in that a damage calculation was made over an entire kind of long-form campaign, and the fighter was the one still doing the most damage, despite the wizard having certain spikes in different places and other classes being accounted for as well. However, I think that this is a fairly reductive view of the argument. I think that it's a pretty common thing to think about, that damage is what matters in games like this, and in a lot of cases it is. In combat, that is usually what matters. However, I think that options are really what the linear fighter and quadratic wizard are about, particularly the fact that while fighters might do damage consistently, a lot of the times they don't have a ton of options outside of combat. That's part of the reason that fighters can often seem good for new characters, new players to the game. In that they're fairly simple to grasp, both in combat and out. You don't have a lot of plates to spin. You don't have a lot to keep track of. Whereas wizards, you have spells for in combat, out of combat, roleplay, utility, building shelter, stuff like that. It's a wide variety of applications that don't just do damage, and I think that that's honestly quite important, and I don't think that just reducing the argument to exclusively damage is quite doing it justice. Building off of this, as a DM, I think it's incredibly important to be aware of your players' options and to take them into consideration when building roleplay, combat, or exploration encounters. It always feels good to be able to do something that you're the only person in the party who's able to do that thing. Like if you're a ranger, you're able to kind of track enemies better than anybody else. If you're a rogue, you might be able to pick a lock. If you're a barbarian, you might be able to break a lock or a door. Whatever's needed. I think that it's important to consider what your players have at their disposal, and particularly think about ways that they could get creative with their capabilities. Like I said, barbarian breaking lock if the party doesn't have a rogue per se. I know for one example, my current party does not have a rogue. However, we do have an artificer who has tool proficiency in thieves' tools, which is quite helpful. So that option remains despite not being tied to the class that is typically thought of in that way. It is also important for considering when giving players rewards, the idea of presenting them with new options that they're able to use, particularly via magic items or giving them skills as a part of like completing a quest or training of some sort. I think that it's incredibly good to give players options or enhance the options they already have to help them feel kind of specialized and unique from their party members. In that, I think it's very important for any party to, while kind of being interconnected, everybody should feel as if they are integral to the party. I think that in any core D&D game, a goal of mine that I try to look for is I try to make every player at least feel like they have one particular thing that they excel at, that they are better than anybody else in the party at. I think that that really helps them feel more involved in the game as players, and in my experience, helps them become more invested. That being said, diversity of options is also the key there. I had a player in my first ever game that I ran. This was very much a mistake on my part, and I don't recommend you do it. She was a new player as well, and she played a cleric. She really didn't do anything but heal, because I think my initial description of cleric was, oh, they're healers. So she just took every healing spell. She was, I think, life domain, but she did not ever do anything but that. And in our next game that we briefly played, it did not last nearly as long, but she played a bard, but she still only healed, pretty much. This mindset where healing was her only option available, and the thing that she had to do and was good at kind of persisted. So I think it's incredibly important to allow players to vary their options a fair bit. I think it's important to allow players to be good at different things. And also, I think that going back to the fighter a bit with that previous argument of them being linear, I think that the Battlemaster is far and away the best designed subclass of the fighter, primarily because it gives more options, both in combat and out of combat, in that disarming somebody can be good in or out of combat. If somebody's like holding something in a negotiation that you don't want them to hold, you just take it out of their hands. Furthermore, I think that the fighter needs to be more designed around kind of these martial capabilities that might not be possessed by any other members of the party. I really like the idea of them being the kind of most capable without needing anything, needing any spell book or focus or anything. And furthermore, speaking of my own experience, when I've designed a fighter subclass, I designed the Bowmaster martial archetype. And this archetype focuses around kind of entirely martial archer subclass type deal. Kind of a Legolas, like the classic Legolas is a fighter, Aragorn is a ranger with a sword. But it's entirely focused on trading in attacks for utility, in that you could use 2 attacks to fire an arrow that tethers you to a wall or to an enemy. You could also, alternatively, what are some other arrows that I'm blanking on? You could fire multiple arrows but make them less accurate. You could increase your damage for more attacks, or you could give yourself advantage to try to get one surefire hit. I think that providing these options in combat for fighter are also incredibly important, in that I've said incredibly important a lot, haven't I? I think that it's influential to be able to give them more variety than just I shoot at that thing or I hit them with a sword 3 times. Giving people kind of variation and making them think on their feet more is much more engaging in combat. It can really make them feel like more of a complete member of the team than just the guy with the sword who hits things. In the past, I've talked about the Paladin being my favorite class, and I think that the reason that it is my favorite class is the options provided to them. It really feels like when you're playing a Paladin, you can do everything. You're not going to be necessarily the best at anything except maybe fighting undead, but you can deal damage, you can tank, you can wear the heaviest armor in the game, you can heal, you can cast spells. Depending on your subclass, you can do all kinds of things. I love the fact that a couple Paladins get counterspell, because just being able to like pull that out at like the opportune moment is fantastic. I think that overall, the idea of classes receiving that many options is really cool, and that's why I tend to gravitate more towards the half-caster type archetypes, in that it feels like they can kind of do a bit of everything, be a bit of a jack of all trades. And a lot of parties need that, in that it's often the case that parties have at least one major gap. Like I said, my current party does not have a rogue. My party last campaign had a lot of damage, but overall they were not the tankiest for much of the campaign, though they had some good healing. It's the ability to kind of alternate between whatever's needed that I really like of those classes, and particularly like Ranger as well. It's super underrated, but I think especially after Tasha's buffs and some of the new subclasses in Xanathar's and in Tasha's, I think it's so much more capable now. The idea of all the different kind of archetypes. And my favorite Ranger option, this is a bit of a tangent, but the new blind fighting style that they get access to, in addition to Fog Cloud, is just the coolest thing ever. And I think that I really need to make a character centered around that. But that's neither here nor there. That's one of my own options that I'm going to start thinking about. But yeah, no, however, continuing on from that, I think that when designing subclasses and classes like I do, or spells even, or magic items, it's important to consider the options that the characters are granted because of those subclasses. Does it allow them to kind of dip into another archetype? Does it strengthen their existing archetype? Does it kind of play off of expectations in some way? Magic items especially can kind of allow a whole new dimension to certain options, like allowing certain characters to fly with boots of flying really just increases the versatility of things. Like if a wizard can fly, they're just kind of out of the fight a lot of the time. Albeit, I know they have fly as a spell option, but not requiring concentration is a whole nother thing. Check out my last video for more details on concentration and how important that is. But yeah, no, just having kind of more depth in that variety of options or in the individual options is very, very good. So that is the video. That's about all I had to say on the topic of options. What do you think? What are your thoughts on overall how options should be treated in D&D or other tabletop role-playing games? Is it handled better in other games? I'd love to hear your opinion. Be sure to comment it below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I think I'm going to start going more in-depth on kind of DM advice type videos. I really like just kind of thinking about this kind of thing and sharing my thoughts. And I really appreciate all the support that the channel has received over the past few weeks, few days, everything. I'm hoping to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year, which is upcoming if you're watching this when it airs. But if it's in the future, I hope the future's okay. But yeah, thank you very much for your support. You can check out some more links via the description below, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.